Welcome back to Help My Business is Growing, a podcast where we explore how to grow and build a business that is healthy and sustainable. I'm your host, Kathy Spatina. The current reality of our daily lives today is that video calls and Zoom meetings are the norm. They allow us to connect with our teams and clients without actually being there in person. But the problem with that is that the physical disconnect makes it so much easier for your audience to drift away to deal with other work, to deal with the dog, the kids, dinner, or, just taking a quick peek at the latest TikTok story that came through. So the question is, how do you keep your audience engaged and how do you ensure that they're still taking you seriously from the other side of the screen? And this episode is dedicated to exploring that. And my guest is going to be Pamela Wigglesworth. And she's going to be talking about how you can nurture, build, and develop your executive presence, because in this age of Zoom that we're currently living through, it is even more critical to have that executive presence and to ensure that you project it when the camera or the mic starts rolling. And selfishly, I also love this episode because it is giving me a lot of tips and tricks on how do I structure my presentations and meetings in a better way. One of the big takeaways for me from this episode was, how do I actually look at the camera? How do I remember to look at the camera so that I can make that personal connection with the person on the other side and not look at myself on the monitor? Because it's so easy to forget that to actually make the eye contact, you have to look at the camera and not at yourself on the monitor. And that has been one of the things that I have really struggled with. And she is giving us a really good tip, a really good trick on how do you actually do that. But before we dive into this episode, I want to tell you a little bit about Pam. Pamela Wigglesworth is an American Singapore-based international communication consultant. She's also a presentation coach, a speaker, author, and the CEO of Experiential Hands-On Learning. She works one-on-one with senior leaders, C-suite executives, and small business owners to help them establish their executive presence. She helps them structure a clear, concise presentation message and deliver their thoughts and ideas with style, confidence, and authority. Join us. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so happy you're here, Pam. We have so much to talk about. And, I've been thinking about executive presence recently and how important it is for a growing business, because as you're growing your company and you're also growing as a leader, and I think that to be an effective leader, you also need to cultivate your executive presence. And since you're such an expert in this field, I would love if you could define for us what exactly is executive presence and why is it so important for a business owner or a founder to spend time to really cultivate it?
Great question. Love it that we're getting a chance to start there, Kathy, because so many people don't understand what executive presence is. It's a term that gets thrown around in the corporate world, and people know that it's something that they need to be an effective leader. And yet they go, what is that? What is exactly is executive presence? And more importantly, do I have it?
Mm-hmm.
So how can you know whether you have it if you don't know what it is? So it remains a mystery to a lot of people. In fact, if you think about the French, have the expression, je ne sais quoi. And that's defined as that appealing quality that really is unknown. And so for us, executive presence for most people is unknown. It still remains a mystery. However, most people use the default and think that executive presence is all about your appearance and presentation skills. Now, while those two things are part of it, they're just a small fraction of what executive presence is. So executive presence, as you say, as your audience is listening and they're growing their businesses and they need to be seen as a leader, that's exactly what executive presence is. It's about leadership perception, how people perceive you to be a leader in your community, in your business, within your family. So if we think about that, it's really about how you show up, your demeanor and your actions that demonstrate to others that you are a leader and worthy of being respected and followed. So let me just take one more second to unpack that a little bit more. So, what does that look like? Because people are going, yeah, that's a mouthful, but what does that mean? If we were to unpack that and break that down, executive presence is really three things. It's your gravitas, that means your demeanor and your behavior, how you show up, your grace under fire, how you show up when you're stressed, how you carry yourself, how you command the room. Then it is your communication, and that equates to how you speak and what you say. And lastly, it's your appearance, and that's your attire, your grooming, and your posture, and how you actually come in and command the room. So it's those three things that people can actually wrap their head around: your gravitas, communication, and appearance.
That's such a great definition. And thank you for unraveling this mystery for us because even as myself, I know it's important, but it's really hard to pinpoint what exactly it is. And since we're on this topic of what exactly it is, can you give us an example of a leader or a celebrity that you think is a great example for this executive presence?
Okay, a great one that we all get to see in the United States right now is Kamala Harris. So, in other words, she has stage presence. It just comes natural for her. When we see people who have executive presence, it's almost like they have this magnetic appeal. They're articulate. They have great posture. They have just the way they carry themselves. And everybody wants to be around them. And you'll know that person. You'll see them in a maybe a conference room breakout or in an event where suddenly somebody's talking and you see this group of people forming around them. It's like everybody just wants to breathe their air. There's something about them that you just hang on every word they say. Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, Susie Orman, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinta Ardern. She has great executive presence. Think of the person, like I said, when you walk into the room, everybody's around them. Bill Clinton was known to have, or still is known to have, great executive presence. They are just articulate and they are able to command the room, and everybody looks at them and says, yes, I could follow that person. That's a leader.
So, how much would you say is this a case of nature versus nurture? Are these people born with it and then they nurtured it? It came easily to them? How does that work? How does someone actually go and build their executive presence that is just not there, but they want to be there?
Yeah, good question. Most people, it is not innate in them. The good news is it's something that can be, as you say, nurtured and developed over time. It's a matter of understanding and knowing what are the different pieces. If we were to break down the gravitas, the communication, and the appearance, these are things that we can then work on. So, yes, you can develop your executive presence. So, what I want to backtrack for a moment and for your audience to understand that normally we experience executive presence face to face. But in this upside down COVID environment where we're limited to maybe doing our meetings in an online fashion, we aren't able to pick up these subtle nuances of confidence through a handshake or eye contact that we normally would have in a face to face meeting. So, therefore, it's really important for us to step up our game when we're dealing in the virtual world because it does require a different skill set to really make an impact with the person on the other side of the camera. So, we can look at that and explore what are some of the different elements that we can really focus on so that we can develop that leadership capacity in the virtual world.
Yeah, and I would love that because virtual environment has been our reality for the last 2 years, and it does not seem like it's going to go away anytime soon or anytime at all. So, how do you not just how do you conduct the meetings are effective and that people are not tuning you out, but also how do you make presentations, especially if you're a founder or if you're a business owner, you're going to have meetings with your bankers, you're going to have meetings with your investors. How do you get that gravitas and that executive presence through the camera? So if you could give us a couple of tips, pointers what to do and what not to do, that would be really helpful.
Well, great. Let's start with gravitas. So we normally would be in a room where people can see us and have an experience of us. We don't have that same element when we're talking through the lens. Well, first of all, let's talk about the lens. And the first thing is that means I need to be looking straight down the barrel of the lens, be it your web camera or the lens on your computer. You need to be giving the other person on the other side the sense that you are looking directly at them. So giving them eye contact, look directly at the camera. The second thing, as far as gravitas, we need to change our state. When I say change your state or a state of resourcefulness, just as you would prepare for a meeting, a face-to-face meeting, equally you need to prepare for a online meeting. So that means I need to be in the zone. I can't just show up, turn the camera on, go from one meeting to the next meeting. I prefer to tell people have at least a 15-minute break in between your meetings so that you can get in the zone, you can decompress from the last meeting and get in the mode for the next meeting. So it's get in the state of mind of readiness. Then another thing, a way to show your gravitas is through being inclusive, using inclusive language. So that means I'm going to use words like we, us. I will use words like in our partnership together, in our working relationship. So I will use words that will make the person on the other side feel included. More importantly, I want to make sure I'm using people's names. So I'm going to say, Kathy, that's a great idea. Or if I have some people in the group that aren't necessarily speaking up in the meeting, I might then use their name and say, well, Belinda, we haven't heard from you. What are your thoughts? Now, I'm not going to use the word, what do you think? Because men will go after a woman when she uses that word. Well, do you think that's true or do you not think it's true? So you want to say words like, what are your, Belinda, what are your thoughts? We'd love to hear from you. What would you like to add, Belinda? What would you like to add, Susie? Any thoughts on that? The leader who brings in everybody into the conversation has 10 times ahead of the game because he or she is being inclusive. So those are some things with gravitas. And then just also how you are decisive online, getting to the point, demonstrating confidence, sitting up straight, even though you're on camera, you're not in the same room, but making sure that people see you as a leader, even if it's in the virtual world. So that's gravitas.
And I would think that actually having one of those stand sit desks would help because, and I use that myself.
I
Every
do
time I
too.
have a big presentation, it helps. It does something to your voice, to your posture, and to your confidence when you're standing versus sitting.
Yes, it changes your energy, completely changes your energy. In fact, we'll say in presentation skills, never go from the stage. If you're the next speaker, never go from a seated position because your energy isn't there yet. So be standing 5 or 10 minutes before if you're in a conference and you're doing that. But even if you're doing a presentation, equally be standing. It changes everything. It gives your hands the freedom to move around and you can gesture more, but it's just a different type of presentation all around when you stand versus sitting.
Yeah. And you brought up a point of looking directly into the camera, and we are recording this on audio, but we're also recording on a video. This is something that I struggle with, and I'm sure a lot of listeners too, is how do you look at the camera while still paying attention to the facial expressions and to the feedback that you're getting from another person? Because if I'm looking just at you, it looks like I'm not looking at you, but I'm reading your facial expressions. But if I'm looking at the camera, I'm not seeing you. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg problem.
It is. It's not easy. And the funniest part for me is when I don't necessarily want to be so engaged, or if I'm talking to a family member, I find myself looking at the camera, not necessarily looking at them. So here's a couple secrets. If you're using your camera on your computer, raise up your computer. Maybe if you have photocopy paper in your home, take 2 reams of photocopy paper and stack your computer on that. That way, you're looking directly at the camera. And also, you're able to use your peripheral vision and glance down every now and then and look at the person as you're talking to them. Now, you can kind of do that while they're responding. You share, again, you've got to make it so you're having a one-on-one with them. And even if it's 1,000 people listening to you, they will all feel like it's you're talking to them. So it takes practice. So turn on your camera and just have a conversation where you are looking straight at the camera. And over time, it will get easier, but it will get to the point where you do have it's a blend where you're looking down, you're looking up, just have your eyes flash down every now and then. People will probably think you're blinking, but it is okay to look occasionally. But the problem is if people see themselves down in the corner, or if I see you in the corner, I'm going to be looking at you down in the corner, and therefore it looks like I'm not paying attention to you at all. And other people will think I'm not paying attention to you when you're the speaker at that time.
What this reminds me of, since I grew up in another country and English was not my native language, and every time I would look at, the English videos, they would have subtitles. And it's funny because I talked to my husband and he's like, you still have subtitles on. And it's so hard to go back and forth between the video and the subtitle. But I've actually trained my brain to be able to look at the subtitle and still watch the video. So I'm actually equating that camera facial expression to that, because if you are doing that on a regular basis, you train your brain how to go back and forth a lot easier.
Yes. Now, you as the speaker can do that. But one thing you need to be aware of, people who are giving presentations need to be aware of this. As you say, you've trained your brain to be able to do that, but the brain cannot read and the brain cannot listen at the same time. So if you're giving a presentation and you're using your presentation, your PowerPoint as your script, and you are simply reading what's on the script, people can read faster than you can speak. So they're at the bottom of the slide and you're still at the middle, and they think you're slow. They will perceive you to be slow. So do not read from your PowerPoint or have some bullets up there, a few words, but know what you want to say when you get to that particular slide so that you're not reading. Because people will then say, well, this isn't a presentation. She could have just sent me the slide deck. I could have read it myself, because now she's just reading to me. So don't put yourself in that position, because the brain reads fast and can be at the bottom. They're on to the next thing. There's no mystery. Or the other way to do that is to animate your slide. And I know we're getting off of executive presence, but since you brought that up, but either animate your slides so that each bullet point comes up and then you speak to that topic, but not so everybody gets to see everything before you get to the bottom of the page. So you're absolutely right. We can't do both, but it's practice. It takes practice.
And since we started into this topic of presentation, and that was actually one of my questions, how do you structure a presentation so that it's actually engaging? Because right now, the last thing you want to do is have this death by PowerPoint via Zoom. That seems like the worst thing that could happen. How do you make it that it's actually engaging to the audience and that it's valuable to them as well? Any tips on that?
Yeah. Let's go back to the next part of what executive presence is, which is all about communication. And that is what you say and how you say it. So if we're going to talk about that, and we're delivering these presentations in the virtual world or online meetings, the first thing is to have clear, strong, and concise language. Okay, so no fubbing around. It means that you no more winging it when it comes to your presentation. The days of winging your presentation are over. It does not work. It does not help you advance your career or advance the needle on a meeting. So be clear about what it is that you want to say. Secondly, we want to have an authoritative tone to our voice. That means we need to have melody in our communication versus a flat tone, monotone. If I start my meeting and I say, good morning, Kathy, it's great to see you. Great to have everybody else here on the call. And I continue the presentation that way, you know that people are going to check out. So we need to bring energy. So that's the first thing. So people need to understand, and I want your listeners to hear this, your secret sauce is to use your voice and your message. That's your superpower when it comes to engaging with the other people. So start with high energy. If you start with high energy, you will continue your meeting with that same high energy. If you start with low energy, it will be low throughout the entire presentation. Next, we want to make sure that you are thinking and speaking strategically. Let me say that one again because this is the key. This is really the gold nugget here. Thinking and speaking strategically. That means I need to start with what's my overall objective for this meeting? What do I want to have happen at the end of this call? What's the action or the decision I want my listener to take after we finish this call? So I need to decide up front, is my objective to inform, to educate, or to motivate? Am I educating my potential investors on a new opportunity? Am I informing my staff about a new software program that we're going to make? Or am I motivating them to feel good and help them through this challenging process? Because now we're seeing that women are experiencing even more stress during this COVID period, during the pandemic, because more responsibility is falling on their shoulders. So, going back to thinking and speaking strategically, I want to think about what I want to say, and I want to be strategic about the language that I use. So, things like I want to use alliteration. Now, alliteration is where I am going to use the same consonant, the sound in a sentence, so that it is memorable. So we think about the brain likes the number three. So I may say, I work with clients to deliver impactful presentations that are clear, concise, and compelling. So CCC, the brain will remember that as a soundbite. Or I want to use repetition, using the same word over and over again. So if I'm talking about marketing communications, I might say, when I work with you, my goal is to help you achieve more awareness, to create more leads, and ultimately create more sales. So I'm going to use words that are repetitive, or I might use figurative language. Personification is where the trees were swaying in the wind. So I'm going to make something that is an inanimate object and put human life features to it. So I want to make sure that whatever I'm saying is going to make an impact. And the fourth thing I want people to know is they need to get straight to the point. People are overworked, overwhelmed, and they've got so much on their plates nowadays. We need to shorten our meeting time. Okay, so if you are planning an hour meeting, you need to try to get that down to 45 minutes or even 30 minutes, because we found that attention spans over the last 10 years have dropped. We've gone from, I think the number is a 10-minute attention span 10 years ago. We're now down to barely 5 minutes that people, before they start to zone out. Now, if you don't keep their attention, they're going to go elsewhere. And so the statistics show that 65% of people zone out and will start doing other work. They'll just open up another window and, they're listening to you, but they're doing other work. 43% of those people, when they zone out, are now going to social media and looking at their profile, maybe making a post, whatever that might be. And the last is 21% start going into online shopping. So if we don't keep them engaged, we're going to lose them. They are going to drift off. We also have more distractions today. We have pets that come in, cats that want to sit on our computer or your lap, dogs that are barking in the background, children that don't understand why mommy's locked herself in the room and is not letting them in. So they want to come in and see what mommy is doing. So you need to think strategically. What do I need to do to keep my child busy while I'm on this important call? Can I give them an iPad? And one good way is to give them an iPad, download a movie, a children's movie, but put it in airplane mode so it's not drawing from your internet power, and then put them in another room. Or hire a babysitter that can maybe take them to the park for that 1 hour or 30 minutes that you're on that important meeting. If you're going to have deliveries or repairmen, schedule that and tell them, look, this is I know you've given me a window. I've got a really important call. Please don't come ringing the doorbell while I'm on this particular call. So this morning, similar situation. Both my husband and I are both equally busy. Neither of us can answer the door. So we just literally rescheduled the meeting, the delivery or the people coming to service some appliances on another day, because we don't want those interruptions happening in those all important meetings. So your superpower in this environment is really your voice and making sure your message is really, really, really clear. Start with the end in mind, reverse engineer it, figure out what is it that I want to achieve with this meeting, then determine what's my objective or what's my intent to inspire, to motivate, to educate, and then figure out how do I want to say that and know that I want to shorten my meeting. So I'm going to do that in a 30-minute time window if I can, because people are so busy. And so the last thing is you want to eliminate the filler words, the ums, the likes, the you knows, so anything like that, because that just makes you appear lazy, and it appears that you have not prepared or practiced your presentation. So communication is probably the number one thing in terms of the overall executive presence, especially today as we're having meetings online.
And do you have any suggestions for someone who wants to eliminate the filler words and they know they're doing it, but they really have a hard time eliminating? Is there any tricks that you can teach us?
It's tricky in the sense once you identify that you have a filler word, you want to use it more. And I'm not going to give you mine because I know once I say it to you, I'll use it all the time and then you'll hear it. What I do in my mind is I say the word in my head before I start the sentence. And I'm afraid if I don't tell you what my word is, you won't understand what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead and give you my
You don't
filler
have
word.
to give me your word. You could give a filler word that it's common to other people's, if that helps.
The key really is people like to use the word in Asia, they like to end the sentence with yeah. And that's the way they're signaling to the listener that I finished. Here's one I hear all the time. When people ask a question, they'll use the word basically. Well, basically, this is all about blah, 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 blah. They ask the next question. Basically, our brand is all about blah, 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 blah. Now, after a while, all the client will hear is basically. And so if they're going to start that, they would say basically in their head, basically, quiet in my head, this product is all about blah, blah, blah. Next question. Basically, I'm saying it in my head to the point where I can just start sharing what it is. I hear filler words when people haven't practiced. So I had a gentleman that I was working with, and I knew he had not practiced. Now, fortunately, we had recorded the session, and he said, "How did I do?" And I said, "Well, I've recorded at least 7 ums and ohs in the first 1 minute." And I said, "And you just continued with that. So I know that you have not practiced," because he's thinking you're using that as a, well, and then you're just thinking. That means you haven't prepared. So script out what you want to say. It doesn't have to be verbatim and for you to repeat it that way, but what is the talking point that you want to share? Just as I say, think and speak strategically, write it out so that you're on top of it. So when that question comes, you might be thinking basically in your head, you just go start speaking. The basically is here in silence and then start speaking. But you will do it less if you practice, and it just means practicing at least 2 or 3 times. People think practice once and that's it. No, you have to practice 3 or 4 times. Use your phone, record your presentation on your phone, and then listen back to the presentation. That's equal to you actually verbally saying it because the brain's still hearing it. But practice, practice, practice.
I do the same thing with my presentations and with the podcast and everything that I that I present and use my voice at. And sometimes it's just so painful to listen to that, but you have to do it because that is how you get better.
And that's how you'll catch when you're doing them. Most people are oblivious to what they're doing. Now, that gentleman was fortunate enough to have recorded. So I said, listen, I just want you to go back and listen to the recording. Count how many times you said that. And then he got back in touch with me and he said, 2 days later, he goes, I want to do it again. And I said, great job. I knew he had practiced. But it looks sloppy and you can appear lazy if you have not really worked that out. And that we only get one chance, or we're getting fewer opportunities to present in front of a client. So it's important that we make the most of that. Every presentation counts. Everyone counts. So we need to make the most of it.
So we've talked about the gravitas, we talked about the communication. How about the appearance? And in the virtual world, a lot of people think I can just show up in my PJs on the bottom and nice top on the top. But
Mhm.
how does the good appearance look like in this virtual environment?
Well, that's a good question. I was going to do a blog post that said, "Do you think I need to iron the back of my blouse?" But you never know when, you think of this way. You never know when there might be an emergency. So, do you really want to stand up and have everybody see that you're in your pajamas? So, for me, I say get dressed to the fullest. So, that's the first thing. Dress as we think about appearance is again your attire and your grooming. So in the virtual world, there's a couple things I want to talk about. Is first of all, turn your camera on 10, 15 minutes before your meeting so that you can see everything behind you. The cameras today, be it a webcam or your computer, all have high definition cameras in them, which means the camera sees a lot more than what you think. Most people think the camera only sees what's directly in front of it. So, me sitting in front of the camera, when in actual fact, the camera sees quite wide. So, you need to make sure that the ironing board is missing, is not in the background. Now, we do know that in some areas people are working from their apartment or they're working from their bedroom, and so they can't really make it too fancy, so just blur the background. Okay, but if you are going to use a virtual background, then make sure that the virtual background has a resolution of, I think it's 1920 by 1280. 1920 by 1280. Now, the reason for that is you'll notice you'll sometimes have meetings with people and they move, and all of a sudden the background or their head moves out of the picture. It's because the camera's trying to figure out what is the backdrop and what is you. And so by having a high resolution, but not too high resolution, if you pick something off the internet and it's 3,000 pixels by 2,000 pixels, you're going to have problems. So when I talk about resolution, that's 1920 pixels by 1280 pixels. And that you'll see that as represented as the letters PX. So when you look at an image and you want to use that as a backdrop, look for the pixels. The other thing is we want to make sure is, again, turning on the camera, what's in the backdrop, how do I look? How do I show up? I always like to make sure that I have a lipstick handy. Okay? I have a lipstick handy so that I can put my lipstick on. I can, touch that up before I'm actually getting on a call. If I'm happen to have an emergency call, I also have a scarf handy so that if I'm in a t-shirt, I can quickly just tie the scarf around my neck and dress up my t-shirt and no one will be the wiser. Or just keep a jacket on hand, something that's a neutral color that you could easily just throw over if you're wearing a t-shirt and you only have 2 minutes, where you can just grab that jacket and put that on, put your lipstick on. Now, there is the virtual lipstick, but you want to avoid that. I actually saw a lady, she turned on the virtual lipstick and she kept moving and the lips were following her on the screen. It was the funniest
Oh
thing.
no.
Yes. So same thing with the eyebrows. So you need to be careful. If you're moving a lot, the camera's trying to keep up with where you are. And the lipsticks was over here and she was over there. And so be careful about that. But as far as showing up, again, we want to make sure that we have that eye contact and we want to make sure that we're well lit. If you are backlit, in other words, lights coming from behind you, you will appear black, dark. Okay. You will look like you are in the witness protection program because it can come out so dark that people can't see your face. Okay. So either invest in a ring light, doesn't have to be big, can be a small one. If you don't want to spend the money on a ring light, then find a suitable desktop lamp. You can go to IKEA and get something cheap, something that sits in front of you that you can put the light on you so people can see your face, because this is important. We want to make sure that they can see us, not be backlit. Natural daylight is always good, but that again, sometimes there's too much sunlight, so either shears that you can pull, but the most important is making sure the light is in front of you and not behind you. So that's your appearance. And as you say, dress based on your corporate policies, but also think of this. If you were going to go meet somebody face to face, think, would you dress in a t-shirt? You probably wouldn't. So why should you dress that way in a virtual meeting? You need to show up as a professional. Remember, this is all about your leadership perception. Do people perceive you as a leader? You need to show up that way. So that doesn't necessarily mean for the guys to have a tie. It doesn't mean the ladies have to always be in a dress or a jacket, but you need to at least make sure it looks appropriate for the person that you're meeting. So if I'm going to meet with a CEO, I'm going to be dressed. I'm going to be ready for that. And you know what? And once your meeting is over, it's okay for you to go change clothes. But I would hate to stand up and have somebody see that I'm still in my pajamas or in my bathrobe. I had a meeting with a lady at 11 o'clock once, and she wasn't dressed. She says, "No, I can't turn my camera on. I'm still in my pajamas." And I went, okay. But you will remember those things. I remember two people reaching out to wanting to do a joint venture with me, and they were dressed in such a casual manner. Honestly, I can't tell you what they asked me to partner them with, but I can remember how they looked, and that stuck with me. And I went, that's not somebody I want to do business with. So show up in a professional way with the attire that's appropriate for your industry and for that meeting. Appearance is key.
Such great tips, Pam. And another thing that I would want to add to the background is if you can buy one of those green screens. That way it's a lot easier to project something in the back. You can have your logo on
Exactly.
it. You can have a lot more options, and you will not have the problems with you fading in and out of the background.
Exactly. And even if you do a green screen and then you do have the high resolution image, it's not going to be such an issue for you. One other thing I want to say is when you talk about the background, whether it is your natural background, whatever it's your office or bedroom, whatever, or if you're going to have a Zoom backdrop, make sure that you are contrasting in terms of your attire with what the background color is. So if I have a white background, I don't want to be wearing a white blouse. I want something that's contrasting. So many men we see are wearing a white shirt, they're using a white backdrop, and all we can see is like a floating head. So contrast what you're going to wear with the background. This is why it's important for you to turn on your computer in advance and your camera in advance so you can see how do I show up, and then you have a chance to go and change clothes if you need to, change blouses, get a scarf, get a jacket, so that you do contrast with what is happening in the background.
That's good to know. So we went through gravitas, we covered communication, we covered appearance. And if someone wants to really dive deep into cultivating their executive presence, are there any books or resources that you would recommend that would be helpful to them as they're going on this journey?
There are a couple books out there. I'm trying to think if there's a new, I would say even Google this one. I can't remember the exact title, but it's Executive Presence in the Digital World. That's another one. There are different people who are doing profiles. I do coaching around that. And really, what I do when we're talking about executive presence is it's the practice, it's the small little things that we want to focus on, because people don't really necessarily know how they show up until somebody else takes a look and says, this is what I want to make sure I'm avoiding. Things like, and even though we're doing this as a podcast and you're audience can't see what I'm doing, but using how you use your hands. It's great to talk with your hands, but you also want to ensure that you're not getting your hands too close to the camera, because the closer my hands get to the camera, the larger my hands become and my fingers become. So we want to make sure that we're gesturing to the side. So when I'm working with people that way, we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty of how can we improve your gravitas. Then we look at how can we improve your communication, and what is it we need to be doing in terms of our appearance and how we show up. And a lot of that, again, is the eye contact that you're giving to the camera and practicing how do you present when I'm actually, because we don't want people to hide behind their slides. I want them to be present when they present. So that means they're showing up equally with their slides. But there's books out there on executive presence. I apologize that I should have come up with a few, but I can suggest that to you, and that maybe you can put that in the resources box in your description as well.
Yeah, that would be great. And then we can put it in the show notes as well. That would be very helpful. The last question I have for you on this executive presence is, and this is something that I'm curious, how does emotional IQ and emotional skill, how does that tie into the executive presence? Is someone who's very high on the emotional IQ, is that easier for them? How are they correlated? Are they even, how does that work?
That's a really fabulous question, because I think this is one of the elements that's missing right now is the EQ. This is why I say use inclusive language. We need to make sure that we're including everybody. And so the leader that is aware of their team and brings them into the fold, into the conversation, is going to do far more, is going to be better at communicating with their team. So the EQ is key. And that's one of the things that's missing. People are, when we're in the virtual world, there's so many things that come into play. So an example would be your mobile phone, turning your phone off, or yourself. I know you say cell phone in the US, turning your cell phone off so that you're not getting all the pings and dings and all that. What happens is there is this element of distrust when somebody's phone goes off, and it might be that the phone is in front of them and they can see that the message has popped up, and they immediately, their eyes dart to that, to look at the phone. Now, if I'm on the receiving end of that, I automatically think, oh my gosh, he's not listening to me anymore. She's not listening to me anymore. In addition, people are unaware that there is a slight delay. We don't necessarily see it, but there is a slight delay between our communication. And it's that little bit of delay where we start losing trust. So, as an individual, as a leader, I need to make sure that I've turned off everything, that I'm giving you my undivided attention while we're on that call, that I'm checking in with you. I ask you, how are you doing? And not only do I say, allow you, I'm not going to let you get off the hook by you saying, oh, I'm fine. I'm going to say, no, Kathy, really, how are you doing? So that then I'm giving you permission to tell me, you know what? I'm actually struggling. I'm actually having a hard time balancing my home life with my work. I work in my bedroom, and therefore I don't have any separation between my work and my home. I'm trying to homeschool my child now because of a lockdown or an outbreak in my, or a flood or a hurricane, that my child can't go to school. So now I'm responsible for teaching them online learning, while at the same time trying to get my boss to understand that I'm still working full time, while also trying to get my husband space so that he can get his work done. And meanwhile, I still have to get dinner and lunch together for everybody else. So yeah, I'm struggling. So the boss who has got the EQ is going to check in. And so it's a new dynamics also for bosses as well. Now they have to become, what I want to say, not an expert, but they need to be on top of wellness, health and wellness, mental wellness for their staff, as well as trying to be concerned about the financial bottom line. So it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to probably, we're going to see some changes in leadership, and those that are also going to need help, because it's just moving up the ranks.
Yep.
So I think work-life balance is going to be key, but EQ is huge.
So, Pam, you gave us so many great tips and tricks and information. But there's one question that I ask every single guest that comes on this podcast, and that is, what is the one tangible next step that listeners can take in their business if they are trying to cultivate the executive presence? Something that it's easy, next step that they can do in the next week, in the next month. What would be that next step?
I would think about the next presentation I need to give, and I would work backwards. Grab some paper, pen, or type this out and say, what is it that I want to achieve? How do I really want to move the needle with this next client? Even if it's to close the deal or to get the next appointment. And then reverse engineer what I want to say. I want you to think of the presentation as 4 parts. The first is the introduction, then the body of the presentation. That's when I'm going to give 3 topics. Then I'm going to have a conclusion in my presentation. That's where I'm going to wrap up briefly what I've just talked about, those 3 topics. And then I'm going to end with a close. And the close is the call to action. This is where I ask them what to do or give them instructions for, let's set the next appointment. Are you ready to buy? But reverse engineer that presentation, map it out, and then think strategically. What are the words that I want to use? How do I want to show up? And just really focus on crafting a fabulous presentation versus just throwing it together at the last moment. Think of that presentation as one that you can use over and over again, but map it out. Think it through. What are my topic 1, topic 2, topic 3? Under topic 1, what are the 1 or 2 talking points that I want to cover? What are the 1 or 2, 3 talking points I want to cover under topic number 2? And lastly, number 3. Again, I'm going to wrap it up, but I'm going to close in such a way that the listener is ready to take action. Because if I've used my words properly, if I've used persuasive language, I'm definitely going to move the needle. So it'd be map out that presentation by reverse engineering it and think about the communication.
Fabulous, Pam. I love that advice. And that's something that I do with my presentation too. Having that call to action makes all the difference at the end.
Most people forget it. It's the one thing they forget. They'll end with the conclusion, and then it will be, thank you so much for listening to my presentation. That's not going to get you anywhere. Thank you so much for listening to the presentation. We look forward to meeting with you and scheduling the next appointment with you. We want to work with you to give you a demonstration. We invite you to come to our plant, our facility, walk through. We invite you to have a meeting with our compliance team, whatever that might be. Do not leave it with, thank you very much, but have a call to action. Thank you very much might get you the deal, but it may not. So
Don't leave it up to chance.
exactly.
Pam, where can our listeners get in touch with you?
Thanks for asking that. They can reach me through LinkedIn at Pamela Wigglesworth. I think LinkedIn. So I have my dedicated name under that. Or they can reach me at my website, which is experiential.sg. That's EXPERIENTIAL.sg. Experiential.sg. Also on Instagram, so they can find me there at Pamela Wigglesworth Coach.
And all of these are going to be in the show notes as well. So you do not have to memorize this. Just go to the show notes, and all of the Pam's Instagram, LinkedIn, and her website are going to be in there. So thank you so much for being on the show, Pamela. It was such a pleasure.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I really hope that your listeners gain some value, and they're more than welcome just to reach out to ask questions. I'm there to help.
I hope this episode gave you a lot of ideas on how you can nurture and develop this executive presence in the Zoom era. Because as it turns out, it just might be here to stay. And if you are someone who struggles with making this eye contact in the camera, I also wanted to share this tip with you that I recently started using myself in hopes that it might help you as well. So this is what I did. I went to a craft store and I got a bag of googly eyes. I think they were about $2 or something. And I took the two googly eyes and I glued them on each side of the camera lens. That way, it's a constant visual reminder for me that I have to be looking at the lens, making eye contact with the googly eyes to be able to make eye contact with the person that I'm talking to. It's a really, really good tip, and I hope it helps you as well because it was a game changer for me in my meetings. Also, as a reminder, this episode does come with its own blog post, just like every other episode before it. And it does include all the detailed timestamps. It also has all of the resources that Pam was talking about. It has a link to her website, it has a link to her LinkedIn and Instagram as well, so that if you do have questions about the executive presence or you need help with it, you know where to contact her and where to go to find her. And I do have a favor to ask. If you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, if you could please go to the show and type the number of stars that you think the show deserves, because it really helps other entrepreneurs find it and other people find it that they could benefit from it, and it will help them with their business. Thanks so much. Until next time.